A bed of roses?
No, it wasn't a bed of roses. It was an average family.
Oh, okay.
We had our struggles, our ups and downs, like any other family. I went through school, finished, joined politics, and here I am. So, in a nutshell, it was a regular upbringing that I got. Except that it was one thing with a lot of discipline. My grandmom was very, very religious, and so she insisted that we grew up in a disciplined fashion, and it has helped.
Are you also very religious?
Well, I wish I could say that. I'm not too religious. I'm not too religious, but I observe the basic tenets and principles of life. So,
but you are a Christian.
I stay out of trouble. Yes.
I am. Okay. And what church do you attend?
Well, I was brought up in the Church of Pentecost, but lately I fellowship with the Methodist Church every now and then.
Any reason?
No particular reason. I am more inclined towards the Orthodox way of doing things.
Okay.
I have more faith in the way that they go about their religious activities.
Yeah. I see. So which parts of the country do you hail from?
Well, as they say, I'm 50-50. My mom comes from the central region.
Oh, I see. Which part of the central region?
That's the Abakrampa. That's where my grandmother comes from. And being a Kan, we tend to gravitate towards where our mom comes from. My dad comes from Abetifi in Kwewu.
Okay.
That's in the eastern region, yes.
So you speak Fanti, I guess?
I speak Fanti flawlessly.
I see.
On the interview, growing up,
you're very interspersed with Fanti.
No problem. Growing up, because I lived predominantly with my mom and grandmom.
I see.
That influenced me a lot. But there was a time when I could not speak a word of Fanti. Because I also happened to have lived with my paternal grandmother.
Okay.
In fact, she is the one who actually took me to school first. I started school under her wings. So I became more conversant with she than Fanti. So when I came back to my mom's, that's when I picked up the Fanti language. But I speak both.
Okay. Yes. So where did you have your basic education? Where did you also have your secondary education?
Well, basic education, I attended a number of schools. And the main reason for that was that my dad used to come in and out of the country. And anytime he came from abroad, he found a reason or an excuse to change my school.
Right.
So I attended a number of them. I started at a school called God's Wisdom. That is in Adedempo at Palladium in Accra.
Okay.
Then I went off to a boarding school called St. John's. That's at Achimota. Then I ended up at Hansen Road SDA GSS. That is also in Accra. That is where I completed GHS. Then I went to Wesley Grammar School here in Accra, Dansoman. Then I went to KNUST.
I see. Is that where you started politics?
Yes, that's where I started politics. It was an interesting encounter. So from KNUST, I went to the University of Dundee in Scotland for my master's, yes.
Okay. But at what point did you realize that you wanted to go into politics? I'm sure that was not a childhood dream.
Absolutely, it wasn't. Let me say that I've always been inclined towards the left of center of politics. You know, I grew up at a time when President Rawlings was the dominant figure in national politics.
All right.
And I tended to agree with his principles and philosophy and what he espoused at the time. I thought that it was something that would inure to the benefit of the country. And the underlying principle of his political ethos was equity. And working to improve the lot of the vulnerable in society. That sat well with me. It found resonance with me. But I wasn't political, even though I used to follow the news a lot. I used to be big on current affairs. It was something that I recall that in school, I used to buy the Daily Graphic. And at the time, Kwabena Yeboah had the Africa Sports newspaper. So I used to buy those two papers with my meager
pocket
allowance
money
that my parents gave me.
I see.
And in on days when I could not afford, I used to team up with a friend of mine who is now deceased, Kofi Anofrimpong, to buy it so we could read and follow the news. So up until the time that I got to the university, I was quite abreast of national issues, but I wasn't political until I bumped into a friend called Mosisama. He is currently doing a PhD in Portugal. He was at the time the president of the Tertiary Education Institutions Network of the NDC. He was my classmate. And he, because of our interaction, he got to know that I had interest in national affairs. And so he convinced me to join TEIN, that is the NDC Students' Wing. It wasn't difficult for him.
Right.
Because, like I told you, I've always been inclined towards the left of center of politics. And I found that there were like-minded people, both in my class and within the larger institution. So I got in there, I became an executive member. And it was an uphill task because Kwakye University at the time, being situated in Kumasi, which I used to refer to as the belly of the beast in terms of being a stronghold of the New Patriotic Party, was predominantly MPP. And I found that there were many who were NDC who were cowed into submission, who simply could not express their belief because they felt that there would be an overwhelming counter from the other side. Now, this motivated myself and Moses and others to lay down the gauntlet and challenge the status quo. One of the things I also like to do is to associate with the underdog and try to fight our way up.
Right.
So we worked, we pushed until Kwakye University gained a sort of recognition and acceptance within the students. And by the time we left school, we had managed to make significant inroads into national politics. I mean, some of my contemporaries were Gideon Buaku, who at the time was the president of TESCOM, Gifty Awari Abuaji, who is now the deputy director of the National Service Secretariat, and a host of other people who, at the time, the SRC president, when I entered, was our MP for Sojaman now, Honorable Nyakwampim. And later he was succeeded by the managing director of the Ghana Publishing Company at the time. Right. He also became SRC. He found himself on the right of our politics. So it was a very exciting time. From 10, I then graduated towards national politics because I got in touch with the likes of Dr. Edward Manibuama, who essentially became my mentor. I got in touch with Samuel Okuyeto Ablakwa, Mr. Atuahoy, an excellent spotter of talent who honed my skills and expertise in politics. And it's been a long journey.
So you rose through the ranks?
Absolutely. I went through every single level. At a point, I was a member of the Committee for Joint Action, which took on the Kufuor administration frontally over issues that we believed undermined the national interest. So through that too, I came into contact with the likes of Mr. Kwesi Pratt, Dr. David Percy, Mr. Chuichu Opoku, Madame Emilie Arthur, and a host of very seasoned political activists who helped to shape my perspectives on national politics and the various methods and strategies that could be used to propel one's message. So it was a very important learning period for me. Those of us who were in myself, Dr. Manubuama, Okuyeto Ablakwa, and co, we used to refer to one man's house in West Legon as the University of West Legon because we used to go there regularly for counseling right. and nuggets of wisdom in the way to approach our national political life.
Okay. Now, you have been described as one of the babies with sharp teeth. Do you see that as a compliment?
Well, it was a jab from our founder. The genesis of that was in the famous, or rather infamous, Fonka Games. You recall that sometime in 2011, the wife of our founder, Mrs. Cornelia Ajman-Rollins, mounted a stiff challenge to Professor Mills's leadership of the NDC. I believe in an abiding philosophy that once a leader emerges, he deserves the unalloyed support of all members of the organization.
Right.
For that reason, myself and others in the NDC who could be considered as young techs within the party felt that it was necessary to shield the president from what we considered at the time to be unfair and unwarranted attacks on his person and his leadership. This meant that we had to fend off some of these attacks. It obviously did not sit well with Mr. Rollins. And I recall that at one of our congresses in Kumasi or so, he used that expression. But it was an expression that he used to express perhaps his frustration at the fact that those of us young techs would not budge in our abiding belief in the leadership of President Mills and the need to ensure that he was successful in his tenure. I don't think that it is a compliment, but to be honest with you, I don't lose sleep over it. I'm a conviction politician. When I got into politics, I went there with a set of principles that I will not change unless there is compelling reason to do so. And one of them is to stick to what I believe in. It may not necessarily sit well with you.
So you don't take offense when somebody describes you in that terms?
I don't take offense. You see, in politics, the last thing you need to worry about is tagging. You cannot enter politics without suffering some bruises. So sometimes you need to wear those bruises as a badge and not worry about those things. What matters is what fair-minded members of society perceive your work to be.
So you still see yourself as someone who is not in good terms, or it's not in the good books of the former president?
Well, I don't think that is an accurate description. To begin with, I don't think one enters politics in order to be in the good books of anybody.
But this is your founder.
Yes, but the point I'm making is that I believe in principle as opposed to individual beliefs. I told you that growing up, he influenced my thinking about politics a lot because he stood for certain principles that one cannot argue against. It was a principle that I believed in. That must be separated from his personal beliefs and his personal conviction about how a particular decision ought to be taken. Right. That you don't share in a particular strategy of his is not the same as saying that you are not in his good books. I don't think that we should conduct politics that way. We should remove the personalities out of politics and only abide by the principles. I mean, I was one of his fiercest defenders on Kwakye University, on the campus of Kwakye University. I recall my friends used to call me Rollins's man because I would not allow any derogatory comments to be made about him. And he is someone who suffers a lot of misperception and whose image has been unfairly bastardized by political opponents, especially in the aftermath of the 2000 elections. So those of us who found ourselves in the eye of the storm in students' politics on the NDC side made it a point to staunchly defend him. During the National Reconciliation Commission sitting, a lot of things were said about him. It was incumbent upon us at the time to mount a defense for him, to the extent that the principle that he espoused at the time coincided with what we believed in. It was never about his person. Of course, he has charisma, perhaps the most charismatic politician this country has seen, aside of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. I mean, I have argued that he will win any election that he contests. He is a nightmare opponent for any political...
Have you ever contemplated visiting him?
Well, I think that we've met a couple of times. But if something occasions a visit, why not? I'm not averse to the idea. But the point must be established clearly that it is possible in politics to have a disagreement with someone, irrespective of his status in society, and still maintain some modicum of respect. I don't think that should be lost on us.
What do you make of his posturing recently? I mean, the wake of all the things that are happening within the party. I mean, your quest to reorganize the party and some of the comments he's been making.
Look, it's a democratic party. He reserves a right, if he sincerely believes that things are going wrong in our party, to voice concern.
Right.
Of course, there are those who would wish that he will use more discreet and diplomatic channels, but he prefers to use more public outlets. That is fine. Those who disagree with him must also have the same leverage, the same platform, and the same opportunity to air those grievances. And it should not cause any ripples of friction in our party if we hold ourselves out as a serious democratic political party.
Right.
Then dissent or the expression of divergent opinion should not be frowned upon, to the extent that it is held within an atmosphere of respect and mutual recognition of each other's rule. I don't think that there is a difficulty. So I don't have a problem with him voicing concern, except that sometimes when counter views have been expressed, there are those who have unfortunately misconstrued that to mean disrespect for his person. I think it is unfortunate. We need to encourage healthier interactions within our political party, the NDC.
Right. Does Felix Kwakye Ofosu believe in politics of equalization?
No. You see, when you say politics of equalization, there's what you call principle. When you take a position today, you should be able to stand by it tomorrow, no matter how palatable it is. If at any point you believe that new facts have emerged that render the position you took in the past obsolete or inaccurate or untenable, you should do the honorable thing by acknowledging that you were wrong and that based on the emergence of new facts, you have taken a new position and stick by it.
Have there been instances where you have done that? You have shown remorse? Because I was trying to get some reactions before the interview, and people feel that you are the type that would make reference to something that MPP did to justify why the NDC is doing this.
You see, that is done in order to show what we call duplicity and double standards. up until the point where you acknowledge that you were wrong by taking a certain position. You cannot take another position against somebody who has done the same thing. Let me give you an example. You know, when the Woyome controversy started, initially, information was scanty on the subject matter. So the default position as party members and communicators was to defend government's position. Right. When new facts emerged, I publicly stated that we erred in the things that we said initially, and that government clearly erred in the payment of that money to Mr. Woyome. I had no difficulty admitting that. But if I did not make that admission, and another time I come hard on the MPP for paying judgment debts, I would not possess the, if you like, moral authority or credibility to make that sort of pronouncement. I told you that I'm a conviction politician. When I take a position, I take it because I wholeheartedly believe in it. It may not sit well with you. You may disagree with that position, but I believe in it nonetheless. So I will express it. I will not badge or change my position just to please you, because that will not be me. So if I take that position, it is because it would have been well considered. But to the extent that new facts emerge that render that position, if you like, indefensible, I have no difficulty conceding that I made a mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move away and talk about your role as a Deputy Communication, I think, Information Minister.
Yes. First information, then later
communication. Do you reckon you handle that role very well?
Well, to the best of my ability. When I pick up a course, I throw my everything into it. That is one of the things that I also live by.
But if you could change the hands of time,
of course,
what would you have done?
Of course, there's always regret after the fact. I mean, to the extent that we could not win the 2016 election,
which will come.
Yes, it meant that there was some deficiency that we need to go back. Perhaps we should have done far more. We should have started much earlier and be a bit more forceful and forthcoming with information. So that deficiency I acknowledge. But to the extent that I was given a specific task in government, I think that I discharged it to the best of my ability. And I leave the public to pass a verdict on whether or not they thought I conducted myself properly. Yes.
Now, the Independence Day brochure, which was written with a lot of mistakes, and we also know the issue about the bus branding saga, were some of the key issues that actually rocked your office, or let's say the government in totality. What would you say happened? I mean, from where is it?
For some reason, and I suffered a lot of trolling at the time. For some reason, on both occasions, I was indisposed. I was actually admitted at the hospital when those incidents occurred. So I did not get the opportunity to speak in an official capacity for government. The independence brochure thing was clearly a human error. It was a regrettable error nonetheless.
So I do
not believe that it warranted the sort of public backlash.
It was embarrassing.
It was embarrassing. It was an error. The public reserves the right to criticize government. But I thought that sections of our society blew it out of proportion for purely partisan reasons. I mean, only yesterday it emerged that the vice president had gone to distribute some expired items. Clearly, the vice president would not intentionally go and distribute expired items. Some negligent official may have caused that embarrassment to him, but because he is vice president and he headlined the activity, he will come in for flack. So what that tells us is that things like that happen, mistakes like that happen. It is inadvertent. Even though we are government and people believe that government is omnipotent and can do whatever it wants, mistakes do occur because human beings man the various institutions of government. So the brochure incident was a regrettable error that should not have happened. It embarrassed our country. But you moved on. Why? President Akufo-Addo suffered a major glitch on his first outing as president, when in his inauguration speech it emerged that his speechwriters had plagiarized not less than 3 heads of states. Now, that was a major embarrassment to him, but the president didn't write the speech. You can argue that perhaps he should have perused the speech and, given his vast experience in politics, should have detected that these were lines that belonged to other leaders. But it happened. An inadvertent, embarrassing occurrence. We moved on as a country. I don't think that we should.
Was the bus branding saga also inadvertent?
Well, I think that what happened then was that an investigation was conducted. The Attorney General looked into it and found that a certain amount of money should have been charged. I think 1.5 million Ghana cedis, but it was more money was charged than should have actually been paid for it. Government ensured that the money was retained.
Were you part of the negotiation?
I was not. No, I was not. That was an entirely Ministry of Transport transaction. It had nothing to do with the Ministry of Communications.
But I mean, let's even put the investigation aside, personally, do you feel that there was lack of proper due diligence?
Well, I think that it is quite obvious that if a more thorough job had been done, that would not have occurred. But like I told you, governments are made up of human beings. So sometimes perhaps the expectation is a bit excessive. We tend to demand too much of people and expect that everything will be spick and span. That expectation is legitimate because the public invests both their trust, mandate, and resources in the government to perform a certain task. So when things go wrong, they reserve the right to take on government, even in very harsh terms. But the point must also be made that these are human beings managed, so they can make mistakes. But once the mistakes are identified and corrective measures are taken, I think that it should suffice in terms of atoning for whatever wrong went on. So in the case of the brass branding, government did what was right, looked into the matter. When the facts became available, the persons who charged more than was necessary were asked to refund, and they did so. So that matter for me ended there.
Right. At the time you were a Deputy Communications Minister, a lot of people thought that you were somewhat arrogant. You were not forthcoming with information, especially in your relationship with the media as Deputy Communications Minister. How do you react to that?
The bit about not being forthcoming with information is entirely inaccurate. I don't like engaging in self-gratification. But if anybody contributed towards making the work of the Mahama administration known, that would be me. I went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that. Today, if people know about all the work that we did, it was because we sat down consciously as those managing government information to put that information out. Of course, in government, sometimes information is put out on need-to-know basis. It's not everything that happens in government that is put out. Right. So once the information is cleared for public consumption, we did not have any hesitation putting it out. So I don't know on what basis anybody would allege that we did not put out the information. When you come to me for information that I am not authorized to put out, I cannot do that.
For instance, you hold a press conference and once you're done, you say, no, I'm not saying anything anymore. I'm not
but because I put out information on behalf of an institution called government. I do not, first of all, I am often not
to account for it.
I am often not the source of that information. Again, before I put out that information, because I work up to a higher authority, I need what we call clearance. I need to be authorized to put out that information. If I don't have that authorization, I should not put it out, and it should not happen anywhere, even in your organization. I'm sure you have a public relations department. If they are not authorized to put information out, if your director, the one directing this program, does not authorize you to do certain things or say certain things, you will not say them. It doesn't mean that you are not forthcoming. So that is something that the public ought to be aware of. And certainly you in the media know that it is not every time that you want information that you get it. The bit about being arrogant, I think that is a product of, both prejudice and unnecessary conservatism in our politics. We are not, first of all, we are not used to people questioning authority. And definitely we are not used to young people questioning authority. Even in our homes, I mean, you dare not question decisions made by your father or your mother if you are a child. I mean, if you are asked to eat a particular meal, no matter how objectionable it is, you are required to eat it without asking questions. So traditionally, as a society, we have not liked it very much when authority has been questioned. And we have frowned on young people challenging the status quo and demanding answers from authority. So when you are young and you find yourself in politics and you have to banter with persons older than you and you have to take firm positions on national matters, the unfortunate perception builds that you are arrogant. But those who know me know that I am not. I'm a conviction politician, like I have said. So when I take a position, I am not going to budge until superior facts emerge. I don't see how that translates as
you think people are misconstruing the fact that you are assertive?
We politicians suffer that a lot. People who don't know us or have never encountered us say things with authority as if they have every available information. But I am not. Those who know me know that I am not. I just happen to be assertive. Okay. It is a quality that, unfortunately, our society has not traditionally encouraged young people to possess. But if our country is going to change, we need to break down those barriers and allow the citizenry to question authority rigorously, irrespective of their social background, irrespective of their age, or irrespective of their creed. Of course, that must be distinguished from decency and civility, which must apply in politics. But I have even held the view that citizens are allowed to even harshly criticize people in authority without suffering any retribution. So I am quite liberal-minded when it comes to that. Unfortunately, those who are conservative in our society tend to think that you don't have to question authority in a certain manner. And if you are young, then certainly you are bad from airing some opinions or even taking on some people. We also have a culture of erecting sacred cows. Basically, we say that there are some classes of people who, by virtue of their accomplishments in life, their age or their status, cannot be questioned. So if you dare question people like that, you must be arrogant. Or if you dare criticize people like that, you must be arrogant. It is part of the prejudices that we young people suffer in politics. But
let's wrap up the conversation on your role as Deputy Communications Minister. What would be the one thing, the one remarkable thing that you achieved with that office?
Well, there were three of us. There was my boss, the ever hard-working Dr. Dini-Osman. There was my colleague, Honorable Ofosu, and myself. I basically was in charge of coordinating government information and disseminating it. My boss had overall, if you like, responsibility for the sector, which also includes the telecommunications sector, the broadcasting sector, and the ICT sector. And he discharged his duties with remarkable brilliance. So much was achieved in that ministry that if I were to continue or if I were to proceed to enumerate them, we will sit here forever. But on my part, I think that I did what I could within the constraints of time and resources to put out government information. We lost elections, but it was not for want of knowledge of what we had done as government. Other factors, as we've learned as the time has gone by, accounted for our loss. But certainly it was not because people did not have information about what we did. And I look back on the work we did, and I think that we did a fairly good job. Of course, we could have done much better as any human institution. And if we had the opportunity, we would correct whatever errors may have arisen or whatever rough edges may have been identified.
What do you make of the creation of the Office of the Special Prosecutor? And the question again, would you avail yourself if there is the need for you to provide some responses to the Special Prosecutor?
To begin with, I recall saying somewhere that the Special Prosecutor will be a special waste of everybody's time. It was not because I failed to acknowledge the need to hold political office holders accountable, but it was because I thought that we were needlessly duplicating the functions of various government agencies. There's the Attorney General's Department, which in my view possesses the capacity to go after anybody who has committed some offense while serving in public office. Traditionally, we have argued that because the Attorney General is also a member of cabinet, often political considerations are factored into what he does in terms of prosecuting people who have held public office. But the same argument can be made for the Special Prosecutor's Office, because it will be occupied by human beings who may have one allegiance or the other. The current occupant is known to be diametrically opposed to the National Democratic Congress now, despite the fact that
he's not from the NPP.
But I'm saying that he is known to be diametrically opposed to the National Democratic Congress. Even when he was appointed as Special Prosecutor, he engaged in commentary and rhetoric that showed clear and open bias.
Felix, will you avail yourself?
But the point is that, but let me land on the office. So that immediately defeats the objective of having, if you like, a neutral arbiter occupying the office. I don't think that we needed to create another office and call it Special Prosecutor's Office for us to be effective at fighting corruption. What has he done since he was appointed?
We have been told,
no, we have been told that he's been starved of resources. Only last week, the Auditor General revealed that he has visited the place. He doesn't have the manpower. He doesn't have the resources. He doesn't have the necessary wherewithal to do his job. So he's sitting there as a lame duck, doing nothing, basically earning a salary at the end of every month. Those who set up the office don't appear to have the motivation or incentive to empower the Special Prosecutor to work. So why did we set it up in the first place? As for availing myself, like any other citizen, I am not above the law. So if I commit an offense and the Special Prosecutor believes that there is a reason to go into it, why not? I'm
Would you be taken aback if you are invited one of these days?
As I said, I know that I have not committed any such offense. So unless that offense is contrived or, if you like, trammed up, there's no reason for me to have any difficulty. But what we must guard against is making that office the receptacle for frivolous petitions. I don't think that helps our society, because we want to fight corruption, for people to just get up and go and make frivolous accusations that have no merit, just to waste everybody's time. And it happens a lot in our jurisdiction. We need to cut back on that.
So just in case you just tune in, this is Inside Out, some personality discussion here with former Deputy Communications Minister Felix Kwakye Ofosu. Now let's talk about the 2016 elections. You were part of the NDC's communication machinery, and the party witnessed such, I think, the most embarrassing electoral defeat to the MPP the NDC, I beg your pardon, has ever suffered. When you look back, I mean, since 2016, I'm sure it's been a moment of sober reflection.
Absolutely.
What are the regrets?
Well, the regret is that we did not mount a robust enough campaign. Perhaps we should have challenged some of the false claims that the MPP made a lot more, and aggressively pushed across our own achievements. I think that we over-relied on the ability of the electorate to discern for themselves what we had done and compare it to the promises that the MPP were making. I have told you that from my own analysis and the research that I have seen over the period, I have come to the conclusion that it was not for want of knowledge of what we had done in government. It was more about believing promises made to them and what they considered to be economic hardships at the time. These two combined to create the situation that we found. Because you see, if you look at the MPP carefully, the state that they were in was lamentable. The sort of violence that they had engaged in would not endear them to any, if you like, crossover voter. I mean those who are in the middle, not the rabid MPP or NDC person, but those who are in the middle. They would naturally not gravitate towards a party that had shown that level of violence and disorganization. But it appears that the other two motivations I spoke about, the promises that they made and the feeling of economic difficulty, trumped analysis that bordered on the state of the party at the time. It was obvious that they were not even prepared to govern. So in government we have seen, and President Mahama made a very poignant statement when he read out his concession speech, that he leaves his tenure for posterity to judge. The posterity has come very,
Did you
very
envisage the defeat?
No. To be honest with you, a loss in an election is not surprising. What surprised me was the margin of victory that the MPP chalked. I don't think that they deserved it. They had not done enough. They had not done enough to warrant that kind of victory. And on the evidence of what we've seen, that position is entirely justified. I did not anticipate that we will lose by that margin. But that we lost is not entirely surprising, because when you go into an election, anything is possible, especially for a party that had been in power for 8 years, even though our candidate had been in power for 4 years and was entitled to a second term if the people of Ghana so approved it. So what surprised me was the margin of defeat, not necessarily the defeat itself.
Was President Mahama right when he said that the media formed a cabal against his administration?
Well, I think that the honest truth is that sections of the media mollycoddled the MPP. Look, the NDC will not survive some of the things that the MPP has done and gotten away with. There's no way the media would permit the NDC will get away with what the Delta forces and invasive forces have done and gotten away with. The media would not tolerate the level of nepotism in the Akufo-Addo government today if it was an NDC government. If an NDC government was in place, the media would not tolerate the appointment of 110 ministers and 998 presidential staffers. Even now, there's a difficulty on the part of sections of the media, and I choose my words carefully, sections of the media, to point out wrongdoing in the MPP. When they have to speak about wrongdoing in the MPP, they generalize that, oh, political parties, governments over the years. But when it is the NDC, they will pick the NDC apart and analyze them on the basis of their distinct personality or image. So yes, President Mahama was right. When he criticized the media for what was clear bias.
In wrapping up, unfortunately we don't have time, but in wrapping up, 2020 is just around the corner. From now till 2020, what are your expectations of the new EC boss, Madam Jean Mensah?
We have expressed serious reservations about her. In her previous role as the executive director of the Institute of Economic Affairs, we in the NDC had running battles with her because we thought that she did not exhibit the sort of neutrality that somebody in a role should exhibit. And there are many examples that we can recount. When she was appointed, we indicated that. But we do hope that now that she is electoral commissioner, she recognizes the need for her to be impartial and remain neutral at all material times in the processes that lead up to the election. If she does that, she won't have a difficulty, because I don't believe in bastardizing public officials for the sake of it or for partisan gain. But she must also recognize that she occupies a sensitive role, and that role is there for the pursuit of the larger national interest, not the pursuit of a partisan MPP agenda. So to the extent that she remains neutral, she reaches out to all parties, and she treats everybody fairly, she shouldn't have a difficulty with us. Right. Because we traditionally have not been known to harass public officials in the manner that the MPP harassed Charlotte Osei.
Okay. Does Felix have presidential ambitions?
No, first of all, I don't even qualify by the constitutional, what do you call it?
Not now, maybe in the future.
Yes, but, well, when I entered politics, I didn't envisage becoming a deputy minister at the age that I became. So who knows?
Have you ever thought about it?
Well, it hasn't crossed my mind yet. But who knows? You never know what may happen tomorrow. So one thing I don't do in life is never.
Okay.
And, I don't do that. I used to say never. Yes.
In wrapping up, let's talk about your nuclear family. Tell us more about that.
Oh, it's a small family. I married. I have children. I have parents. Both parents are alive. Okay. I have siblings and other relatives.
But you're married?
Yes, I am.
With how many kids? 2
of them.
Okay. Yeah, right. We unfortunately we need to wrap up, and we are wrapping up with Bisakades or Doka Penta. Yes, we understand it's one of your favorites.
It's one of my favorites.
But thank you very much.
I'm a fan of high life, really.
Thank you very much. I've been talking to Felix Kwakye Ofosu, former Deputy Communications Minister. You're still watching GA Today. The show continues.